My name is Killen Tang, and I am the Outreach Director here at OxfordSpeaks. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. First, please take note of the emergency exits behind you or in front of you, and keep all cell phones on silent. Second, note that this event is live streamed on our Instagram account at OxfordSpeaks. And finally, I'd like to thank Keble College for hosting us, and to the university proctors for helping us with the handling of this event, along with Nancy Pelosi herself and to her team. A special thank you to the International Relations Society and the Diplomatic Society for helping us bring together such an informed audience. Today I'm honored to introduce Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, who served as the 52nd Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, serving between 2007 and 2011, and again from 2019 to 2023. Speaker Emerita Pelosi is the first and only woman to have served as House Speaker in the history of the United States, and has been widely heralded as one of the most powerful, effective, and consequential speakers in American history. Born in 1940 in Baltimore, Maryland, Speaker Emerita Pelosi graduated from Trinity College, Washington, with a BA in political science. After moving to San Francisco, California, she was first elected to the House of Representatives in Congress in 1987, and has been subsequently re-elected to the House 18 times. Between 2003 and 2007, Pelosi served as the House Minority Leader, becoming the first woman to lead a major party in either chamber of Congress. And after Democrats took control of the House in 2006, Pelosi was elected to become the Speaker of the House, becoming the first woman, the first Californian, and the first Italian-American to hold the speakership. Working with former President Barack Obama, Speaker Emerita Pelosi was instrumental in the passage of the 2010 Affordable Care Act, with the most significant regulatory overhaul and expansion of U.S. healthcare coverage since the enactment of Medicare and Medicaid in 1965. During that time, she also oversaw the passage of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, following the 2008 financial crisis, as well as the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009. Between 2011 and 2019, Pelosi served again as the House Minority Leader. Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House a second time between 2019 and 2023, where she oversaw 2 impeachments of former President Donald Trump. Following the election of President Joe Biden in 2021, Pelosi played a key role in the passage of multiple pieces of legislation, including the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Honoring Our Pact Act of 2022, just to name a few. After stepping down from speakership in 2023, she continues to serve as a member of the House of Representatives, representing the 11th District of California. We are excited to hear about her life, her storied career in Washington, and her views on contemporary American politics. Now, OxfordSpeaks co-presidents Sam Zia and Sophia Lee will now engage in a moderated discussion, Q&A, with Speaker Emerita Pelosi, followed by audience questions. Please join me in welcoming Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you so much for, hello? Okay, I will also be projecting. Thank you so much to everyone who came to this event, and thank you so much for joining us here today. I think we'll start with some questions about your life, career, and then we'll move on to some open Q&A for everyone here. So I think we'll start with some questions about your incredible legislative success. In the 2020 election, the Democrats held a very slim majority with 222 seats compared to the Republicans' 213. Despite these narrow margins, significant legislation was passed between 2021 and 2023, as Killen mentioned, including the Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Bill, CHIPS and Science Act, etc. Did you anticipate achieving such substantial legislative success at the outset of this term? And what key lessons did you learn in terms of governance and leadership during this period?
Thank you, First Mayor. Thank you for your kind introduction. Thank you so much, and thank you to Sophia and to Sam for leading our discussion for Oxford Speaks. So I want to hear you all speak. I'll try to be as brief as possible. But let me say, as I listen to all of those accomplishments, and they were major, I accept your kind words, but on behalf of my House Democratic members, because it took great courage for them to vote for all of those things. Because needless to say, they were not characterized as positively as they were here today in their districts by the other side. So it was their courage, a shared vision that we had, knowledge of what needed to be done, a strategic way of getting it done, and again, connection to the needs of the American people. That's what President Obama was about, that's what President Biden is about, and that's what we were about. So I accept those kind words on behalf of those people and the courage they had for the first time in history to elect a woman to the leadership, to be the leader and the first woman speaker 8 times, 4 times, 8 years. So it takes courage on because of all of the things, vision, knowledge, judgment, strategic thinking, empathy, but it also takes courage. So I thank you on behalf of them. In terms of our small margin, I say to our members, our diversity is our strength. We love the fact we have diversity of gender ID, geography, philosophy, you name it, ethnicity, all the rest. Our diversity is our strength. Our unity is our power. So let us make a decision, build our consensus together with the boldest possible agenda and take that forward, and we always won. We always won with that. So it was a consensus, respect for other views, and a sense of urgency about what needed to be done. Like when we did the IRA bill, it was the biggest bill ever in the history of any country in addressing the climate crisis. $370 billion to address the climate crisis. We need to do more to help other countries, but this was an enormous and giant step. And we had in the bill's child tax credit, which cut in half child poverty in America. So there's a goal, a purpose, a plan. A vision, plan, a victory. A vision, no plan, a fantasy. So we have to have a plan. That's how we got it done, with a plan.
And that term started with January 6th and the events of that day. I just wonder, for you, having witnessed the events building up to January 6th from the election for 2 months, was that day sort of a shock to you, as I think it was for many people on the outside, or was it almost an expected culmination of, or a natural culmination of the Trump presidency?
Well, again, I want to hear from all of you. As I look out here, I see the future, the beautiful diversity of the attendees. I don't know if you're all in. Some are undergrad, some are grad, and again, the future. So I want to hear what the future has to say. Let me just say this about January 6th. We did not ever expect a president of the United States to incite an insurrection at the Capitol of the United States. No, nobody expected that. That's breaking the wall. But what we did know is that they would try every stunt they could think of to try to have him to stop Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from being president and vice president. So we were prepared constitutionally, legally, speech-wise, and the rest. We knew that they would do Arizona, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So the people from that state were prepared to make their case. And then we had people on the floor who were constitutional experts led by Jamie Raskin, who then couldn't lead it because of a tragedy in his family, but nonetheless part of shaping it all. So we were ready debate-wise and the rest, but nobody could ever foresee violence incited by the President of the United States on the Capitol, our symbol of democracy to the world. We don't like it having Nazi flags and Confederate flags under the dome that Lincoln built. But that was minor compared to the assault on the Constitution and on the Congress, with preventing Congress from doing its job to certify the results of the Electoral College and proclaim Joe Biden and Kamala Harris President and Vice President of the United States. So we didn't ever, all of the security that has the responsibility for this never thought that. And then on top of that, it was shocking that the President of the United States would not send the National Guard as soon as that erupted. It was hours before he did, where some people died, over 100 some police, law enforcement, both Capitol and local, were hurt. But I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. Anybody here from Maryland? All right, here we go. And in Maryland, in Baltimore, this national anthem was written by Francis Scott Key. That bridge that went down was named for him, Francis Scott Key. That's so sad. But he wrote it at the time, forgive me to the Brits, of the War of 1812. And right there at Fort McHenry in Baltimore, he wrote the national anthem. And when we're at a ball game or something, it comes to the end of the national anthem, people cheer, cheer, cheer. But I cheer before then, because in it he says, proof through the night that our flag was still there. Proof through the night that our flag was still there. Hey! That's me alone, but anyway. And that is what we had to do that day. We had to prove through the night of that violence that at the end our flag was still there, as we pledge every day with liberty and justice for all. So once we saw what he was up, as I said, we were prepared for the debate and all of that. Once we saw the violence he was willing to encourage, we knew we had to be very calm, very resilient, because everything was on the line and we had to prevail. So in the course of it, the security was saying, well, you should stay in the site, undisclosed site. Of course, everybody knew where it was, but undisclosed site, we couldn't admit it. And then we'll bring the members here. So we are going to the floor of the House. So the American people and the world will see that our flag is still there in the Capitol, even though they had, well, they made poo on the floor. I mean, it was that bad. You know, let's take it to how disgusting it was. But nonetheless, that we were there to make the vote there in the House and in the Senate and honor that. But when something like that happens, you really have to understand the enemy of democracy. That's what it was. But you can't become like them. You have to be as strong, clear, and know your purpose to save democracy. So, yes, we were surprised that a president could sit in his Oval Office and watch this on TV and just say, oh, we don't believe in violence, when in fact he incited it.
And have you been surprised by how consistent Republican support for him has been in the wake of January 6th? I think many people thought that was the end of his political career. And what do you make of the risk in 2024?
Well, let me say this. Just to get back to the first part of your question, what was really sad that night was after all these members had to be protected by the Capitol Police, they were risking their lives, the Capitol Police, to protect them and the rest, and they knew that they were threatened, that they were all threatened. And we came back late at night to make the vote, and overwhelmingly the Republicans voted not to accept the results of the Electoral College. It was stunning. They would vote against that. The Senate they had some, but in the House it was a big number. And that was disappointing. Never surprising, but nonetheless disappointing. It's funny how, because they try to misrepresent it as to what happened that day. They said, what's your problem? It's just like a normal tourist day in the Capitol. No, not really. They don't come there and poo on the floor. No, that was to me like the most, like, all right guys, get out here, you know. But no, this was something historic that can never happen again, but it is not inconsistent with their assaults on the values of our country all along. Now, we're going to hear from them? Yeah, not yet? Sophia, what do you got?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, how has the rise in political partisanship and polarization, especially during and after the Trump presidency, affected the functioning of the Congress and its relationship with the executive branch? And what sort of long-term impacts do you sort of see that happening in American politics?
Well, let me enlarge the issue for a moment to say we have to unify the country. This isn't about us outdoing them or becoming like them in terms of our law. So let's talk about what it is that we are, that we want to save and elevate and the rest. Democracy. What is that? That is about justice and fairness, liberty and justice for all, as I mentioned, is the pledge to our flag. Democracy. At the same time as we're having that fight in Congress and in the country, there's a fight in the world between democracy and autocracy. Democracy and autocracy. And democracy must prevail. But to see a possible, well, he's not going to be president. That is not going to happen. It happened once, it ain't going to happen again. It's not going to happen. So people say, well, somebody asked me earlier, what if he becomes president, what will we do? I said, forget about it. We must win, but we can talk about that separately. But democracy and autocracy. 2 years ago, like right this weekend, I was the first leader to go to Ukraine from the United States. I brought a distinguished delegation with me. We saw the danger, we saw the courage. And we went home and did $39 billion right away and continued that support for the Ukrainians who are fighting for democracy in their own country, but writ large. Writ large, and you know the other dangers, the other things Putin has Zion. But with that, we have to protect democracy, do our own fight, not hopefully physically as we did that day, but to protect democracy in our country. So what does democracy have in it? What do we hope to encourage other countries to have? It has freedom of the press. It has freedom of the press to have transparency, to shine a bright light on what the politicians are doing so the public knows and can make a judgment. And that transparency leads to accountability. You promise this, you're doing that, or why can't you work together to get the job done? Freedom of the press. An independent judiciary. Some of those kinds of people, one of whom wants to be president again, is going after the judiciary, threatening jurors. That's just not, I mean, that's so uncalled for. And of course, the president appoints the Supreme Court, the whole judiciary, and you see what that, it's almost a rogue judiciary. We'll see what they do today on the immunity. But they waited so long to do it, they already gave him the advantage of perhaps getting past the election. So all the things about freedom of people to vote, they want to suppress the vote. Freedom of the press, they call it what? Fake news. So if they do that, it has an impact. And it's not unlike other autocrats historically in Europe who did similar things to gain power. So we have to protect democracy. I just named a few things. Freedom of people to vote without being scared or not have voting places and not having the hours conducive to working families with that. And this is where I hold the court so accountable for being undemocratic, allowing big, dark money to suffocate the airways with their misrepresentations about climate, about guns, about cost of drugs, about all those things. So we can do something about it, we just have to win the election to do so. But when we say democracy, there are pieces of it that people recognize that are being undermined. We're a nation of immigrants, the anti-immigrant negativity is so awful. Now we have to protect our borders and have rules and regulation, all that, but for them to paint immigrants as a negative force in our country is not the history of America. So again, we have to show a positive way, and people have to understand what is at risk. When he says fake news, and that takes form in his, shall we say, what is it, cult? Whatever you want to call it. Then it is, now I've been famous for never talking politics overseas, but he's not President of the United States, so I feel that I can talk about the absolute, total urgency, matter of life and death for our democracy, a risk to civilization as we know it today, that his election would be.
Hi, Speaker Pelosi. Thank you so much for coming here, and thank you so much for your service as House Speaker. I'm from Washington, D.C. My name is Alex, and I wanted to know, leading up to this election in November, I know Joe Biden recently has sort of made a comeback in the polls. What do you think he needs to do to continue taking advantage of the momentum that he's had in the last couple of months?
So you want to talk politics? That's allowed, right? Okay, well, it's civics, we're talking civics here now. Thank you, Alice, for your question. Let me just say, again, enlarging the issue to elections. You make a decision to win. You understand the strength of your opponent, but you understand you never underestimate the power of your opponent, but you don't overestimate it either. You know the power of your opponent, and we have a great president of the United States. Again, getting back to how we started, a vision for America that is beautiful and fair and patriotic, knowledge of the issues unsurpassed because he's been around a long time and has the wisdom that experience has brought him, giving him good judgment about how to prioritize and get the job done. Strategic thinker, and again, what's in his heart, his love and empathy for the American people. Everybody doesn't appreciate that to the fullest extent just yet, nor do they fully understand what we did under his presidency. A great presidency comparable to Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson in terms of what it did for working families at their kitchen table. So now he's out campaigning. Sometimes you're just working so hard, you're not campaigning. Now he's working and he's out there campaigning and getting endorsements and the rest. As I say, when you make a decision to win, then you make every decision in favor of winning. And that means if it's not taking, then you do it in a way that makes sure people understand. Cutting child poverty in half in our country, as I talked earlier about. But he also has to have many surrogates. Sometimes people like to hear it from somebody else too. That's what we have to do. But here's the thing. 3 yeses. We're going to win the House, we're going to win the Senate, and we're going to win the White House. 3 no's. No wasted time, no underutilized resources, and no regrets the day after the election that we could have done more. So everything is going well from the 3 M's. Mobilization, own the ground, get out that vote. And as I said to some of you earlier, you asked, well, what about the young people who might not vote with him? They won't vote for the other guy, but they may just stay home. Well, we just have to make sure we have enough votes. And if they're not, hopefully, caring enough about women's right to choose, LGBTQ, climate, gun safety, all the rest of that, we think that some of them will come back. But in any event, we have to make sure we have enough votes. Because if you don't have enough votes, you don't win. And it's just that simple. You gotta know where they're coming from. And so mobilization on the ground. Message to you, don't run on empty. I'm a former chair of the California Democratic Party. Your mobilization depends on a reason, a purpose. And he is putting that forth beautifully, in my view. And the third is the money, which we want to reduce the role of, but until we do, have enough to make sure we mobilize, convey the message, win the election, save democracy, civilization as we know it today. And people are we've won every election that has anything to do with a woman's right to choose. In hard red states, Kansas, Ohio, not so hard Wisconsin, but iffy, and more. And we have some on the ballot in other states too that will be helpful. Gun violence is such a big issue. 82% of the people, 87% of the people think we should have background checks, but none of them, they're not in Congress, except on the Democratic side of the aisle. So there are reasons, and we have to say to people, you might, think this one's too old, this one's old and flabby, this one's old and limping, whatever it is, but this is what it means to you in your life. So I have every confidence we're going to win.
Maybe we'll go to someone in the back. How about you over there?
Hi, so the UK has a standard election coming up this year, and I saw that you met the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, yesterday. What do you think?
He's referencing the upcoming UK election, and you met with Keir Starmer, Sir Keir, yesterday, and he's asking what you think of him.
Well, I met with Keith every year since he's been the leader, and I have to say that as important as it was to meet with Keith, I met with about 100 of his campaign workers, and I told them, he may be ahead, assume nothing. Assume nothing. You make sure you get out that vote. Assume is a word that makes an ass of you and me. Remember that. Assume nothing. He has, I think, well, as I say, I've met him on any number of occasions since he became leader. I was always impressed by his background before and the excellence and the purpose he brought to his challenges. He was great. I mean, he was, I met with Theresa May this morning, and I met with the speaker yesterday, so I'm meeting on both sides on these things. But and I've met with the Prime Minister on other occasions, all of them, but nonetheless, the current one as well. No, I thought in the 2021, 22, 23, and now this one, he looks like a person who's ready for success, but also assuming nothing. But I really, that's getting into the politics of the country but I'll be talking about something I don't really know very much about, so I'll stipulate to that. But I do know that he was very impressive yesterday.
How about you here?
Should I stand up?
Yeah, stand up.
Great. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Sarah. So you were speaking a lot about freedom of press and democratic values, but unfortunately, America's credibility overseas is quite atrocious. Speaking about Ukraine and freedom is great, but the U.S. is contradicting this by sending weapons to Israel, and many in this university agree with me. Even though America sends aid to Gaza, it does nothing when their weapons are being used to bomb and massacre. Alongside this, in the U.S. we see a rise in violence, like that 6-year-old Palestinian Muslim boy who was stabbed to death. alongside those other Palestinian students who were attacked. Since freedom of assembly and speech is significant in the US, can you explain your stance on students peacefully protesting on college campuses while being against war and genocide, but they're also being arrested and accused of anti-Semitism? And this includes many Jewish students.
I appreciate the graciousness with which you present and the thoroughness. Thank you for that, because it's a very important question, and the timing could not be more urgent for it. You asked many questions there. I haven't objected to students demonstrating on campuses. I do object to the anti-Semitism, which does exist in some of those protests, but I also object to what's going on in Gaza, first and foremost, that has incentivized people to speak out against that. It has to stop. It has to end. The legislation that we passed for Israel this week, on Saturday, we said we couldn't pass it unless it had the aid for Gaza in it. You have no idea how hard it was to get the Republicans to vote for that. President Biden has been a supporter of that. He's been, all of us have been two-state solution, all of that. Very disappointed in Netanyahu. I mean, I've been so criticized because I signed a letter saying that we want to have an investigation on the bombing of the World Central Kitchen. But the support for Israel is something we've always done because it's been in our national security interest to do so. We have had shared values with them as the only democracy in the region. What happened on October 7th was barbaric and was horrible. And if it happened in your country, as I was in Ireland a couple of days ago and had a similar population to Israel, if it happened in 1400, whatever it is, people were killed, and you'd be wanting some recourse too. Question is, what is that recourse? We believe that Hamas is a terrorist organization, that its charter says that for the destruction of the state of Israel, Israel has a right to defend itself, and also their goal is to put an end to Hamas so they don't do what they did again. But the manner in which it has been done, with tens of thousands of people killed, and on top of that, hunger, malnutrition, dehydration, but also getting up to the fifth level of all of this, famine. Famine is sinful. And these children who are dehydrated, malnourished, and hungry, and perhaps becoming victims of famine, may never get it back, and it has to stop now so that there's a chance for them to have the proper nutrition. The president has been very clear, as all of us have, and his administration and the rest of us have been, they should not be going into Rafah, and Netanyahu looks like that's what he wants to do. I'm very proud of Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer loves Israel. We all love Israel. We love it, but he loves Israel. We couldn't get him to be with us on the Iran nuclear agreement because Israel thought that wasn't the right path to go. When our president Obama was asking for it, and we prevailed, but for Chuck Schumer to say that Netanyahu should retire, that was a drastic step forward. So it is a moment, as you have clearly indicated, there are choices, many questions in all of this, and it really, one answer is that it really has to stop, but we also have to do it in a respectful way that takes us to a two-state solution, or else this violence, in one form or another, could go on. A two-state solution is not served by Netanyahu being in charge. I've told him over the years, you're either incapable of peace, or you're afraid of peace, or you just don't want peace, because you have not ever embraced anything to go toward peace. It also has to stop the settlements, the authorizing these settlements. That it's an invitation to danger and to not resolving the issue. So I'm not here to speak for the president to say what his next step will be. But I know that he, again, has been a friend of Israel, has always supported a two-state solution. We haven't, the Speaker of the House went to Colombia yesterday and in a speech to the crowd said that the president of the school should step down unless she dismantled the Palestinian encampments. He went there with Republican members. Well, and then people said, well, we're not going to vote for Biden, and yet that's what the Republicans are saying. So Biden has been there for the humanitarian assistance, for the two-state solution and the rest. And there's a moment now of how this comes to an end now. I do think that there's some foreign influence in the fight, in terms of whose side people are on. And that holds true of Ukraine. The Chinese are helping the Russians in Ukraine. The people that have been outside my house have criticized Joe Biden, and that only helps, what's his name? And Trump likes that. So it's a moment that calls upon everybody's courage, conscience, and again, making some people unhappy about what has to be done to end this. I mean, people have just, in the Congress, I can say on our side, there are various views, and we have differences of opinion among them, but there's nobody who thinks that there's any justification. If you were the Prime Minister of Israel, and your country was invaded the way Israel was, you would want to respond to protect the people so it doesn't happen again. If you could think of a worst possible way to respond, you couldn't think of anything worse than what Netanyahu did. And we have to make sure he can't continue to do that. But thank you for your question and your dignity.
Someone in the red jumper in the middle.
Thank you, and I think we have talked a lot about politics, but I just want to maybe know more about maybe your general experiences or feelings of being the first female speaker, and what was it like to be the first female in such an important position? And we know that for one thing, there are more and more female in parliament and government all around the world now. Or another, they still experiencing maybe the last ceiling in their career, but do you feel like yourself can be maybe a role model for the future, maybe female politicians?
Can you repeat that for the benefit of us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think she's asking about your experiences as the first female speaker, especially when you first entered Congress in 1987. There were only a few dozen female members. Now there are obviously over 100. But how your experience in Congress as a woman has changed over the years? Does that?
Thank you. Well, I think I see in this room, as I look around, and I see the future, a beautiful, diverse future for your countries, for our country, for UK and the rest. And I especially want to say that nothing is more wholesome for the political process than the increased participation of women in that process. So thank you for asking about women. Okay, so we can have a little fun with this. When I first went to Congress, out of 435 members, there were 23 women. 23 out of 435. So maybe this many people in this whole room, or even more people than this whole room. 12 Democrats, 11 Republicans. Now I came from being the chair of the California Democratic Party, and I had to do elections. So I said, we're going to make a decision here to win more seats. Now we have 94 women, and the other side is up to 35, and that's good, but in the House, and there'll be more in the Senate than were before. And it's a very, very male-oriented, it had been a very male-oriented institution. You talk about breaking the glass ceiling, chicken feed. This is a marble ceiling. They had pecking order going back over 200 years about how this guy was running next, and this one next, and this one next, and just all through the whole thing. So I never intended to run for Congressman. Paul, I'm so happy my husband Paul is here. Thank you, Paul, for joining us. And he, when we got married, there was never any thought of my running for office. I was shy, actually. Right? Wasn't I shy? So, but then people came to me and said, the person who was in the office who was going to not serve again said, you have to run, blah, 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 blah. So we have 5 children. 4 of them are in college. They were 5 and 6 years. I keep reminding my Archbishop, but nonetheless, one was in high school. So I went to her, I said, Alexandra, Mommy has been asked to run for Congress. I've never given this a thought. I've never aspired to it, wanted or anything, but people are encouraging me to run for Congress. And Sala, the congressman, wants me to, and to make her feel better, I want to consider it. I told her I would consider it. I want to get your decision, because any answer is fine. I love my life, I don't have to go to Congress, but I said, I'd be probably gone 3 nights a week. You know, it's 4 days of session, 1 out. Told her what that was and stuff. Said she was going to senior year of high school. Mother, now Mommy and Mother, get a life. So I never heard that expression before. This was 37 years ago. Get a life. What teenage girl want her mother out of the house 3 nights a week? So I ran and I got a life. But when I got there were so few, so we made a decision to grow that number. When I would announce that I was running, it was like, who said she could run? Who said she could run? Light my fire, why don't you? Provoke me to run, why don't you? Who said she could? But I ran and I won. Then I was in Congress for a while, and then people said to me, you have to run for leadership, you have to run for leadership. And I said, I'm not interested, I'm in here for the issues, the policy. I was intelligence altogether, 30 years in intelligence by the time I left Congress, and Appropriations Committee, heaven on earth, I loved my work. No, you have to run, you have to run. Well, we lost in 94, 96, 98. By 2000, I was tired of losing. I knew how to win an election. So we started, and then they said, we won in California big, and they said, you have to run for leadership. Same thing, the guys. Who said she could run? I was like, what is this, an echo chamber from, you know what? That only, again, stirred me further. So then when I won, it was really a tribute to my members accepting, because they were saying, these guys are waiting in line, he was going to be next, and he was going to be next, and he was going to be next. I said, that's really interesting. But we've been waiting over 200 years, and so, you know, I'll be running. So it was negative, even this is within this century. I'm not talking about a long time ago, within this century when the guys were saying that. But once you get the gavel, it's a whole different one. The gavel is magical in many ways. And so I knew when I became speaker, first woman speaker, I had to do it in a way that was advantageous to women, but also to diversity, and that was what we did right from the start, was to say to the chairman, you have to have diversity in the leadership of your committees and we call it the staffing of the committee, and I was honored to be speaker and to appoint the first woman to be the chief of staff to speaker in our country's history. And she's here. There he is, Terry McCullough. Thanks, stand up, please. That was the top staff person on Capitol Hill, Terry McCullough. And then I wanted women to be in intelligence and armed services and foreign policy and Foreign Affairs Committee and Homeland Security, so that people would see women in security. So that if a woman wants to run for president one of these days, she has those credentials as well. So it was, a decision to run, a decision to win, take that decision to win, and to and then make sure. If I may, I don't have much time, but I'll just tell you this story. When I first went as a leader, it's a big deal, leader. I wasn't speaker yet because we were in the minority, to the White House as a leader of the House Democrats. And I didn't feel apprehensive about going because I'd been to the White House many times, a Democratic and Republican president, intelligence, appropriations, all that. So I'd go there and I'd go in the room. And as soon as the door opened, I realized this was unlike any meeting I'd ever been to before, or unlike any meeting any woman had ever been to before. There they were, President, Vice President, House, Senate, Democratic and Republican leader. And now I was coming as the leader of the Democrats. So I'd go in and sit down. George Bush, as gracious as could be, we didn't get along on the Iraq War, but gracious as he could be. And he welcomes me on Nancy, and she went, no, we're going to hear some different ideas with the first woman here. And all that. Yeah. And as he was speaking, Sam and Sophia and all of you, I got closed in on my chair. It never happened to me before or since, but I was closed in on my chair. And then I realized it was Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Sojourner Truth, Alice Paul, all these women were on my chair with me. And I could hear them say, at last we have a seat at the table. And then they were gone. It was so remarkable. And my first thought was, we want more. We want more. But it was a realization. I was standing on their shoulders, for sure. They started in the middle of the 19th century with that convention of women's equality, and now others were standing on ours. So as you think about all of this, know your why. Know why you would be involved. Know what you're talking about. Know how to get something done. You can do this. And show them what is in your heart. And I say this to all of you. Your participation is so needed because in the history of the world, there's been no one like you. Those astronauts up there, they see this little blue ball. And for all the time of every person who's ever lived or died or lives there now, nobody like you. Your experience, your education, your upbringing, your hopes and dreams and aspirations, your authenticity of you. So know the power of that. And when you decide to run, when you decide to run, be yourself. That authenticity is so important. That was the best advice I ever got for running, was just be yourself. You see other people you admire, or be you. Sincerely you. And be yourself, know your why, know your power, and know the difference that you will make. And sometimes it takes a 1-2 punch. You don't always win the first time. And I go to another a Republican president, Teddy Roosevelt, in Europe. He gave this in the arena speech. Again, in the arena, you're not a spectator anymore. And when you're in the arena, it's a dangerous place. I mean, they attack you all the time. It's awful. You know your why. You know why you're there. So that doesn't bother you. But sometimes you have to take a punch. And sometimes you have to throw a punch for the children. Always for the children. That was my why, the children in America. And in the world, really, but in America, 1 in 5 going to sleep poverty every night. That's why the children in Gaza is just intolerable.
I just hope the U.S. stops sending weapons to Israel. Like, I agree with you, but I just don't think they should send weapons.
Yeah, well, especially if those weapons are used there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. we are nearing the end. I think we have time for one last.
He's telling me my answers are too long.
Certainly not. Yeah, you right there. Yeah. Just quick questions, as brief as possible, please.
Okay. Hi, Pelosi. It's an honor to meet you. I covered American elections in Brazil for many years, so it's great to see you in person. And well, we've witnessed all these waves of anti-democratic leaders being elected democratically, and how that's an example of how fragile democracy can be. So I wanted to know your opinion about that. As do you consider this a failure of democracy, and what could the U.S. be doing more to prevent or to make democracy more solid, not only within its own territory, but across the world as well, as you see in Brazil? Often our elections reflect what happens in the U.S., so what else can we do to make our democracy more solid? Thanks.
Well, that's a very important question that you all hear. What can we do to make our democracies more solid? One of the things that we have done and we have to win to make it happen, because the Senate, you need 60 votes, so we need to change that, and then we're able to pass bill, is to make people's confidence in elections stronger. Like, my voice and my vote is important as anyone. Right now they think big money weighs in, and what's the use of going there? I'm going to have to wait 8 hours to vote because of the suppression of the vote that is there. Partisan redistricting, where legislators choose their constituents rather than the constituents choosing their representatives. So for these and other reasons, and again, big money suffocating the airways with misrepresentation, especially from the fossil fuel industry, from the gun industry, and the rest. They don't talk about fossil fuels or guns. They talk about good things, and you think you're misled. Let's put it that way. Misrepresentations that they have. So anyway, we want the people to have confidence in the electoral system, and I'm just talking about our country. But it would hold true in other places, although big money doesn't play the same role, I don't think, in other countries. We have to keep the foreign influence out of elections. They played a major role in our country and still want to in the next election. We have to keep that out so that people know it's a free and fair election in our country. But in addition to that, we have to preserve the institutions of government so that a free and fair press can report and be transparent and critical of elected officials. Be transparency there, and therefore accountability there. And we strive for bipartisanship, which is harder and harder now. But the threat to that, now we're talking about the threat to that, and I'll be talking about this later, is that there is a whole populist, and when I use that term, I define the populism of ethno-nationalism. Like, this is the way our country has always been, and we're proud of our country, and we want it to prevail as white as it ever was. That's kind of, I would say it in your eyes. And other countries, when newcomers come in. So it's not only a nationalism, that's an extreme patriotism, like my country right or wrong. That's not patriotism, that's nationalism. So that, combined with ethnicity, who are these people who are coming into our country? And this is the fight that we have. Democracy versus autocracy. And the path to autocracy is paved with these ethno-nationalist attitudes. Anti-immigrant to the nth degree. Anti-immigrant to the nth degree. Now, we in our country think our whole success of our country is because of immigrants. Do we have to have rules and have people come in? Yes, yes, yes. But central in Europe to certain things that have happened in some of the countries has been using the immigration issue far beyond its impact in elections. And I'll close with a quote from another Republican president, Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was considered the master of communication, the king of it all. And he said this, and everybody looked up and paid attention. "This is the last speech I will make as President of the United States." He made it on January 19th, the day before the swearing of the new president. "This is the last speech I will make as President of the United States, and I want to communicate a message to a country that I love." He talked about the Statue of Liberty, and he talked about how the world looked at the Statue of Liberty with hope and optimism and an invitation to come to our country. And because that door was open, America became preeminent in the world because of all these newcomers coming to our country with their hopes, dreams, optimism, and courage. And we will, as long as we keep that door open, we will continue to be preeminent. Should we ever close that door, you have to Google it to see it. It's longer and more eloquent than I conveyed it, but you get the point. And then we have people describing in our country, immigrants, vermin, to use an example of the kind of language that he uses. And that's not healthy to a democracy where people who have their uncertainties about immigration and innovation and immigration and what that means to their economic success and that of their families are attracted to that. And immigration has the least to do with their economic uncertainty. Innovation and globalization, that's what Joe Biden has been about in our CHIPS bill and our infrastructure bill and all the great jobs for everyone. And the education to go with it, or the jobs that don't even require a college education, but ensure good pay and benefits and the rest. So democracy is well served by a good economy where people feel comfortable in their ability to raise their families and the rest. But there are those who use for political advantage, and maybe they believe it or maybe they don't, but for political advantage advocate ethno-nationalism, populism, which is a threat to democracy. So we have to strengthen democracy, but be aware of the threat and counter that as well. You all have an enormous advantage, this beautiful education that you're receiving. And not only that, learning from each other, different experiences, different nationalities, and the rest. It's just a joy to behold you and to see the promise that is in this room, and the interest that you even have in showing up to make your point, to ask your questions, whatever it is. So I've heard Oxford speak today. I'm honored to hear your views by way of Sam and Sophia and your individual questions as well. But thank you for your interest, and thank you for the contribution that you, I know, are prepared to make the future better across the globe. Thank you so much.